Hello, everyone, and welcome to this event from Vermont Independent Media. We are talking about youth journalism tonight, and we have a variety of distinguished guests with us this evening. We are going to talk about a variety of questions. My name is Stuart Strothman. I am the managing editor of a high school newspaper in Bellows Falls, and we are going to talk about a variety of issues, ranging from how to deal with controversial subjects, how do we address school issues, town issues, how do we have freedom of speech and at the same time write about the things that we need to write about in schools. So I wanted to welcome the guests that we have, and I'm going to let them speak for themselves. We'd like to start with Jeff Potter.
Thank you so much, Stuart, and thank you to everybody on our panel and in our audience, especially our student participants. I'm really happy to see you all here. My name is Jeff Potter. I am the editor of The Commons. We are a weekly nonprofit independent newspaper serving Windham County, Vermont. And I've been doing this for 15 years or so, and it's the best job I've ever had. And a lot of what I love about it is recruiting new writers, young writers, working with people who want to learn how to do this stuff, because it is so essential to community, and community is so essential to a healthy and vibrant world. And I think that pretty much sums up everything about what we do and why we do it. And the rest is details. And I'd love to talk to all of you about the details tonight. So thanks again.
Well, thank you, Jeff. We'll go next to Tim Calabro.
Hello, everyone. My name's Tim Calabro. I'm the editor and publisher of the White River Valley Herald in Randolph. We're a very old newspaper. We were started in 1874, and we've had just 5 publishers in all that time. I got my start at the Herald when I was a senior in high school, and I became an intern there doing photography, and never managed to escape. So I'm there to this day. And I agree with Jeff that getting young people involved in news is hugely important. I personally think that understanding how our democracy works, which is sort of the lifeblood of a newspaper, is one of the most important things that we can do to keep democracy functioning. So thank you, everyone who's interested in all this, and for joining us.
Well, thanks very much, Tim. And next we will go to Nancy Olson.
Hello, thank you, Stu. I taught English at Brattleboro Union High School for 35 years. I started the journalism program there and taught it both as a class and as an after-school activity for 19 years. And I'm thrilled to say that at least one student every year from the journalism program went into the business in some way. So that was very exciting to see that they were able to move right into different positions of responsibility in the different media that they worked in. Since my retirement in 2013, I've freelanced for the Commons and for the Reformer, and it's very exciting. I'm so glad to see young people involved, and I hope that they continue. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Nancy. So next I'll have Austin Mellon introduce himself.
I'm Austin Mellon. I am currently a enrolled student at Bellows Falls Union High School and have been doing student newspaper for 7 total years, 4 in the middle, 3 in the high school. And yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. We're so glad to have you. And also Grace Warius. We'd love to have you introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Grace Warius. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a junior at Bells Falls Union High School. And this is my first year being part of the newspaper at the high school.
Great. Thank you very much. So we're going to launch in. I'm all set with introductions, I believe, at this point. And so we have a variety of questions that we wanted to ask participants. And I know it was nice hearing your introductions. I think we have one person here at BCTV who was one of your journalism students, Nancy. And I wanted to say also that Grace has in her background working at the State House as a, what is it called?
A legislative page.
Yes, so some background there. The first question that we wanted to talk about had to do with dealing with controversial topics. And as high school journalists, and also middle school journalists, I've done a variety of newspapers, actually. I worked for the Guilford Gazette for 9 years, starting with Becca Ballant in the editorial department and then moving over to production. And then Putney Paper was an after-school newspaper that we did for 3 years. Both of those had business departments. And then now the Terrier Times at the middle school, and then now the Howler at the high school. And so topics have come up where, it's a kind of a delicate thing. Do you cover it? Do you not cover it? How do you talk to the administration about the issue? And how do you make sure that people are being heard while you don't step too heavily on at school? So to that end, I want to talk a little bit with Austin about some topics he's covered. I know in particular, there was one that involved the vandalism and TikTok trends that I don't know if you've heard about them. They affected Brattleboro High School as well. And there was some effect on us. So Austin had to cover that, and he had some interaction with the administration. And I wonder if, Austin, you'd like to talk a little bit about your experience, and then the different things you heard from different people, and then what you included in your article.
So overall, what it ended up being was talking about how this trend influenced, or students trying to do this trend of essentially vandalizing the bathrooms, vandalizing the school, and stealing various objects from the school. And within that, I talked to both custodian and the faculty about it. And within that, I was told not to put in as much, for that the more I put in, the more that people would want to do it. Kind of this monkey see, monkey do, where if they read about it happening within the student newspaper, they might think, oh, maybe I should do that. So it was kind of this battle between whether or not to put something in or take something out. Essentially, do I go with putting more info in to get as much as I can for the story, or do I try to leave some out to kind of go with the faculty and hopefully not have that event happen of where it would escalate because more people did it because they saw it in the paper?
And I would say that you were able to put some hard news in there about some of the things that had happened. And then on some levels, our administration is pretty open. But at the same time, we probably left out a number of things that we could have included. So I have an image of that, and I'll share my screen for a moment, if that's all right, just to, let me see, do I have the right one here? Just to see the article. We have a picture there of some twisted stuff from the bathroom. They've since replaced the stalls in that particular one. But I don't think it affected us much, actually, as it did Brattleboro. So, yeah. So I'm going to move on and talk a little bit with panelists about controversial topics, and I'm curious if other people can join in. Nancy or Tim, maybe Nancy, would you like to talk a little bit about this issue?
Sure. The main thing I would say, well, the first thing that I would say is that Vermont, as of May 23rd, 2017, has a new voices legislation law, which protects, it guarantees freedom of speech and of the press to high schools and colleges, public high schools, public colleges. So that is protection for the kind of reporting that you were talking about that Austin was doing. That law took about 10 years of work to get it through. And I would like to give the bulk of the credit to Senator Jeanette White, who was absolutely instrumental in bringing that up every biennium until such time as it finally passed. It was House Bill 513, which the governor signed on May 23rd, 2017. But I would also like to inform people or remind people that there are resources. The Journalism Education Association is an excellent resource, and the Student Press Law Center is an excellent resource. Both of those, particularly the Student Press Law Center, will support students in their free press efforts. So at BUHS, in the time that I was advisor, probably the most controversial issue that we covered was dropping the image of the Colonel, our mascot. And that was huge, and over several years of effort. And it was actually finally Principal Jim Day who was successful in dropping that mascot. And it was interesting to me that he was a principal from outside the area. So he came from Keene. And I think that really helped him see more objectively. And we were able to, the school board was able to move past attachment to the history of that figure in the area. So that's the most controversial thing we covered, and we were not restricted in any way.
That's great. I wonder, I actually want to introduce another participant, which is John Mcright, who has joined us. Would you take a moment and introduce yourself?
Sorry I'm late. I'm glad to take part. My name is John Mcright. I'm the news editor at the Addison Independent newspaper in Middlebury, where we come out on Thursdays, and I just finished tomorrow's paper. So I've been in journalism for 30 years. I started at the Hardwick Gazette in Northern Vermont, worked in Boston for a while, then came back up here to Vermont 15 years ago. I work with, as a community newspaper, you all know that we serve the local people. We don't do a whole lot of international stories, national stories, but we want to let take pictures of the community and reflect it back on themselves with words, with pictures, with videos now. I work with younger people, older people, anyone we can get into the office to or online to do work. I particularly like to work with young people because of the energy they bring to the enterprise and the fresh ideas. It can be a challenge sometimes because I know so much more than they do, and it can be a challenge then when they end up knowing more than I do about so many things too. So it can be humbling as well as exhilarating.
Well, thank you and welcome.
Yeah.
We've been talking a little bit about covering controversial topics in school papers and as youth journalists. There are some realities. I remember one time in Guilford where we were covering a nuclear story. It was a protest, and we brought in a person, Eric Schickendance, but we weren't sure if we covered the other side. I wondered if maybe Tim would like to talk a little bit about this issue and his experiences.
Yeah, sure. sort of the first thing that jumped into my head when Austin was talking about his experience was this kind of mentality that you see in administrations, but pretty much everywhere of, if we have this thing and we keep it secret, then everyone will be, we won't have to worry about it, essentially. And I think that that's not a particularly helpful line of thought. I think, in fact, it's, that's where we find corruption, is when we have all these secrets that we're trying to keep from everyone and control the message that's put out there. But at the same time, it really is important to balance what really is in the public interest and what isn't. The other thing that comes to mind is that there's been a great deal of sociological research done about reporting on suicides. And there are certain instances where graphic reporting on suicides has led to increases in communities of incidences of suicides. And so these are all things that if you're doing this kind of reporting, you've got to be really careful and really think through the consequences of whatever you're doing.
Thank you. I'd also like to hear, I think John may be interested in addressing controversial topics in.
Yeah, I do have one thought that from what Tim said about two thoughts, actually. One is experience with administrations wanting to not talk. That's almost universal. The more you do this, the more you find people don't want to talk about things that make them uncomfortable. So you just have to get over that. The best way is prepare all your questions in advance and then listen to what they're having to say. Respond to what they have to say. If they say something you didn't expect, then you ask a better question. The other thought I had, though, was the younger journalists, the high school journalists particularly, are in a good position when they're taking on controversial topics, because if they do their homework and know something about what they're talking about, then they can ask whoever the person in power they're interviewing. It's like, I'm a young person. Maybe I don't understand this. Maybe you understand better than they realize you do. But you get to play a little dumb and say, I don't understand this. Explain to me why things are this way. And one, gives you a chance to enhance your understanding. Two, gives you a chance to get quotes you can use for the stories. Just make sure you write them down. And three, it should hopefully give you a new perspective, at least a slightly new perspective that you can add to the story and add to your reporting too. So if you're paying attention when you're interviewing an official about something that is controversial, be ready to have a follow-up question. If they say something you don't understand it, it's okay to say a second time, I still don't get it, or even a third time, I think it's this way, and then you describe it the way you think it is until you. And one hard thing for some younger reporters to learn is to don't leave until you really understand it. Most people are more generous than you expect them to be, especially if we're talking about schools and educators. Generally, they're really generous with their time. I mean, they're stressed like everyone else, but if you ask them and you're genuine about it, they will explain to you. I think you just have to explain to your readers.
Well, thank you. I know that Jeff Potter, whom I've written for a little bit, is somebody who makes sure you go ask all the questions. So I wonder, Jeff, if you would want to talk a little bit about trying to be thorough about following the story. I also want to add in this that I'm a great believer with youth journalists in recording the story and then typing up the transcript. It really gives you a lot to say, and then you get everything they said. But Jeff, if you would talk a little bit about following a story and what you would say to young people.
Sure, I would kind of extend a little bit what John was saying about just one of my favorite quotes is from a book by an author named Donald Murray, who's written a lot about who used to be a newspaper coach at the Boston Globe. My colleague Randy, who's in the audience here, and I are we by happenstance we happen to be self-educated in a lot of these writing skills from this same book, and that was a really fun thing to learn when we started to work together. But anyway, one of Donald Murray's best advice, a little nugget of advice that I've carried this with me for 35 years, is intelligent ignorance is a positive attribute of a good reporter. The more you don't assume that you know everything, and the more you do ask questions from, with that degree of just curiosity. Most people are just curious. Most people like when you, and appreciate when you admit you don't know something and you want to learn it. And if they don't want you to know it, then that's on them. I think that the best reporters I've worked with are the ones who are probably the farthest removed from being know-it-alls. It's and just really erring on the side of, even if you think you know something, I think that's the whether you know it for sure is always a good it's a good lesson. I've got a good story from a meeting I covered in 1987 when I was in college. And it was a select board meeting at a small town in Massachusetts. And in small towns like this, you have people talking shorthand, sometimes very deliberately, because they don't want reporters to know what they're talking about. But in this case, the police chief came. They hauled the police chief in front of the select board, and the conversation went something like this. The chair said, "Joe, I'm sorry to bring you here, but you got to do something about Audrey." And then another select board member says, "Yeah, people calling the emergency police number are complaining that she's hanging up on them." And so this guy, who looks like he's this lumbering guy with arms the size of ham hocks, is like, he starts getting red in the face. "Oh, I'll fix her little red wagon. Oh, I'm so sorry." So it was a kind of a spectacle. And after the meeting, the reporter for the daily paper blew away to and I just kind of hung out with the select board as they walking out of the town offices, and I said, "Oh, by the way, the Audrey that you were mentioning, is that Chief Judd's wife?" And they said, "Oh, no, she's the dispatcher for his gravel business." And sure enough, the next day's daily paper referenced Audrey Judd, the wife of Police Chief Joseph Judd. And then it was just I mean, all the pieces looked like it was going, so obvious, but you just stop and you just check. You check and you check and you check. Also, you've got an unprecedented opportunity to check public records online. You could do this in the dead of night. You don't have to ask anybody. You just have to know how to do it. And learning how to do it is maybe I've got kind of a twisted personality, but I just find that really fun, and being able to learn and know all this stuff, this wealth of public information. And so I don't know if this is what you were going for, Stu, and I'm sorry.
It's great. It's a great story.
A little rambling here, but that's kind of that's no matter what form journalism is going to take. I'm talking now to the younger people here. That is never going to go away. The need to do all of that sort of checking and those sorts of motions, whether it's online, whether it's on paper, whether it's on both. These are timeless skills, and I really love that you're learning them.
Well, that's great. I want to say also that one thing we had in Bellows Falls in the middle school for many years in the after-school program that was run by Oriana Baez, which I taught in and which we ran a newspaper in, is we had access to town. So we could go in and we could interview people, and we did a wide variety of interviews with municipal people. I'm going to share my screen for just a moment and show a piece that was actually Austin's first piece on the Robertson paper mill. We followed this story and did a lot of work with talking to different people in town. But in any case, we did all kinds of things. We interviewed town manager, the fire chief, we interviewed police chief, we had a business profile in every piece, and all of those were a group of us going into town and asking questions. And one of my particular favorites was Dairy Joy. We had this piece where we went in, and he was sort of a not very talkative Vermonter, but as it turned out, his father had bought the business by raising chinchillas and then selling the fur in the 50s, and then bought the business. And then the big boy guy that they brought in was something that he saw in the woods in Keene, and then telling us about horses.
Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. Oh, wait, you're all set. So in any case, it just turned into a really good story the more he talked. But I wanted to change just a little bit over to some more recent and controversial topics. We have Grace here, who has had some experiences, not just writing, but in dealing with some political issues around the Black Lives Matter flag. I recently ran a piece just explaining what was happening at the middle school. I'm the co-chair of the Diversity Equity Committee, for whatever that's worth, but Grace separately is a member of the Vermont Anti-Racism Network and wears a variety of hats and has been involved with the student council at the school. And I wanted to ask her a little bit about her experience, both seeing that through, and then we're going to cover that as a newspaper. So I wondered, Grace, if you wanted to talk a little bit about some of your experiences with some complex issues. The flag's only been raised in a few places in Vermont. I want to say there's 8 of them. Brattleboro was one of them. But in any case, I wondered if, Grace, you would talk a little bit about some of your thoughts about covering that issue.
Yeah, I definitely think it's an interesting issue to go about, possibly writing about, and a goal to pursue, because even though it shouldn't really be a political issue, it is a very political issue, and people can get very angry when you talk about it. And like you were saying earlier, like going about controversial issues, especially in like small towns, it's very important about how you go about that. And I'm still learning how to do that. And I'm really hoping that I will be able to do a good job when that article comes around. Because, you don't want to like upset people, but at the same time, you want to give the facts of what's happening, and also at the same time, state what's happening, but also, not to try to tread too lightly around other people, because then you're not really, I guess, putting out an honest article, I guess, in my opinion, if that makes sense.
Right. Yeah. I was writing about it and I wanted to make sure it was covered. And I wound up actually doing a short piece about that and making a statement that our newspaper stood behind equality. And honestly, not pushing one way or the other because I thought it would be indelicate. It's interesting. I feel like you could easily start a fire, but in any case, we're hoping very much the board will look at it and moving forward. I wondered, Grace, if you would also talk just a little bit about your experience covering the trauma training that teachers got recently. That was a good article, and you had to talk to a variety of people, and we had some issues where people weren't responding, which comes up a lot. But what was that like?
Yeah, that was a little more stressful to go about writing about, because there were cases where people like I thought weren't going to respond, and I'm a very strict person for myself for deadlines. And Mr. Strothman gives us deadlines for articles, and I really try to stick to those. And so when you email like, administration, and it's been like a couple days and I haven't responded, and your deadlines in like 5 days, and you have I've learned to, become comfortable with pestering people, which is not something I really like doing, but I'm getting used to it now because, with emails, like these things can get lost or whatever. But at the end of the day, these are things you need for an article, and it's okay to pester people about them until like, they answer you. So that was a little stressful, but at the end of the, whole thing, I got responses back. I got really great quotes from some of them, and I think it came out to be a really good.
Yeah, I'm just going to briefly share an image of that article, which turned out to be a cover piece there. Dave Melnick is this person who's been training teachers, and I'll say that they're great trainings. Personally, I'll go out on a limb and say that. But they teach teachers a lot about how to respond to behavior when it's coming from trauma rather than a sort of a need for attention, traditional misbehavior. It's a good topic, so it worked out really well. So we're gonna move a little bit to a broader discussion of opinion writing about freedom of the press. Having heard some of the youth journalists talk, I'd like to go to Nancy a little bit, and you may have some, I know we've talked a little bit about freedom of the press, but I wondered if you'd wanted to talk about some of the things that you've experienced, I don't know, relating to this issue.
Relating to the issue of,
Well, I don't know, Black Lives Matter, or
oh, okay.
I mean, I guess, I'd love to hear about some of your experiences through the Colonel's change.
That took about 3 years for the Colonel to finally be dropped. I had moved to Vermont in 1972 after living in Atlanta, Georgia for 3 years, and Richmond, Virginia before that for about 5 years. And when I first saw the high school mascot, I thought, what the heck is a Southern Colonel doing in Vermont? But I talked to one of the people who was a student. He was a student in the first class to graduate from BUHS when it was brand new. So it was the class of 52. And he said, because we were the first class, we were given the chance to develop the mascot and the motto. And because we were in Southern Vermont, we decided to call ourselves the Pride of the South. And then, we looked around for a mascot, and they chose the Mississippi Colonel, the Southern Colonel. So that seems to be how it happened. But there was a lot of controversy. There was a lot of attachment to it. And as more people of color came, and people who'd lived other places and found this symbol to be really a very racist symbol. It wasn't intended that way, but the reality is that it is, because it came from a very different time and place that was a lot more racist overtly. So anyway, the students who covered it, that we had at least 2 or 3 school-wide meetings that were moderated by Charlie McLaughlin. Student reporters covered those. We talked to administrators. It was a long process. And actually, the paper at that time was called Extempore, EXTEMPORE. And all those back issues and the record of that sequence of events is in the BUHS library, in the files in the back. The paper now is called the Brattleboro Beacon. It's well, if I retired in 2013, so it's been the beacon since I retired. So I guess the main thing was that the students stayed with it. The reporters stayed with the story over several years, and I thought they did an excellent job. We never had any complaints about the reporting.
That's great. And I want to say also, as a person who's been involved with local historical societies, that the record of periodicals from high schools is a very, very valuable record, or from school newspapers. In many cases, the town's history is represented by the papers that are there. So I'm sure that record is very valuable.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because several students who had been on the staff, who had gone on to college and were working for their student papers in college, a couple of them came back and wanted to use the historical record for articles that they were writing at their colleges. So it was used that way.
And in writing the history, I was involved in writing the history of Putney. And when we were looking at decades and trying to figure out what happened, if there was somebody producing a paper in town, that was very valuable to us. Jeff, I wondered if you might be interested in talking about some of the sort of related topics. I wouldn't be surprised if you also covered some of the high school issues.
So sorry about that.
That's all right. Did you cover high school issues I'm sure it's come up.
Oh yeah, we've had a few here and there. We've got a lot going on now that with some allegations of sexual misconduct from a retired teacher. That's been a very difficult and awkward and essential long slog of coverage that we're learning as we go about how best to cover that. And there are things where you want to handle something like that. You want to tackle it honestly, and also with the sensitivity of being part of a community that is trying to, for whom this is very upsetting. So we've covered racial issues. One of the first year I was on the job in Brattleboro, there was an incident where it was probably an early scandal with social media, because a group of kids created a Facebook group called
NHRA.
Yeah, NHRA, the N-word hanging rednecks association.
That's right.
And it's interesting. I
taught a couple of those kids in Guilford.
Yeah. And I think, and one of the most interesting things, well, a couple of things, really this was, there was a whole constellation of issues of long simmering racial tension where you had students of color who were being harassed and harangued on regularly, and a pattern of when they would finally snap and retaliate and fight back, they would be the ones to be disciplined for acting out, that sort of thing. That was part of this bigger picture. The whole but one of the most interesting things was about a year and a half later, they eventually I'm trying to think if there was any sort of formal. There were some criminal charges, I think, and maybe there were
I was involved with the Equity Diversity Committee in Brattleboro at the time.
Yeah.
And both charges, and there was time spent. There was some good sort of recognition and change on the part of one person, but even on the Equity Committee, we had a mediator come from the state to come and sort of help us out.
Yeah.
and dealing with the issues.
But the one thing that comes to mind is about a year and a half after this all took place, one of my reporters was really interested in tracking down this kid and interviewing him and just saying, what the hell happened here? And she got a really good story out of it. It was really poignant and it was really complex because on some level it was clear that he was struggling with these issues and becoming, had some serious remorse. And on the other hand, he was on probation and did stupid stuff and kept violating his probation. And so it was really a roller coaster of kind of contradictions, and it was really, I love the honesty of it, because you want to wrap these things up in a neat little bow and say, oh, this person has completely done a 180 and learned and is but it's not that simple.
Right.
You've got systemic racism and people growing up with this, people who could legitimately think of doing something like this. You're not going to get that out of your system overnight.
No, absolutely.
And that journey is really difficult, and it's a journey that our entire society is making, and has only really come to the surface in the past couple of years. So it's an exciting time to be watching how schools are coping with these social issues, and I would love to I would love to talk to both of our students at some point if you want to get involved with the Commons, because we need more young people and more conduits to what you all are going through and thinking.
Well, thank you.
Not to put you on the spot publicly, but
yeah, then they may be able to follow that up. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some good stories in the offing.
yeah.
But I will say that person was a bit of a follower, and and one of the things that we deal with is who's going to follow what story and what's going to be popular. I wondered if, Tim, you would like to talk a little bit about any issues you've covered related to life in high school.
Oh God, I mean, there are a million, and we have a small army of intrepid young reporters who check in from time to time. In fact, Mary Waterman, who's their ringleader at the White River Valley High School, helps us a lot with that. She's in the audience right now. One of the things that struck me about what Jeff was saying is that a lot of these stories are not individual events that you cover once and then you do it and it's done. They last years or decades, and in a school setting, that means that you're not going to cover the whole story while you're in school. I mean, you've got those 4 years, and then you're out of there, and another generation is going to have to back clean up for you. And that's, with issues as systemic as racism, sexism, those are things that don't go away quickly, and that we're seeing generations of reporters who are reporting on that at professional newspapers. That can be an entire career. One thing, just to be slightly more specific on the mascot stuff that Nancy was talking about with the colonels, this is something that's ongoing in Randolph, in our community here. The school mascot here is the Galloping Ghosts, which the name by itself isn't necessarily problematic, but the symbolism that was involved was a man in a sheet riding a horse, which has some pretty heinous allusions to the Ku Klux Klan. And there was this massive mural painted on the gymnasium. And one of the things that I think Nancy touched on this side of it is that people's feelings about school mascots can be complicated. It's difficult to find a point in history where people intentionally put a mascot forward as a racist symbol, at least in the research we've done here. but times change and people's opinions on things change. And there's been, from the beginning of the movement to get rid of that particular mascot, which they did last year, that's long-term reporting that has to be followed all the way through.
Great. And I wanted to squeeze in a comment from John also on high school topics before I went to a little discussion on our experiences gathering news and how little time we have at school. But John, would you be willing to talk a little bit about some of the things you've dealt with that relate to high schools or youth?
One story we did, I know, was we had some high schoolers cover a shooting, not shooting, but a gun rights story. I guess what I'd take away that maybe the other students who are here could get something out of that was they were very excited about covering it, a little put off by the fact that people they talked to, either other students or administrators, weren't as excited about it as they were, and they just had to go through and do the best they could. The points that several people made about things don't wrap up at once is something, particularly with the younger reporters, you have to remind them that, you do a story, it can be a good story, it can be a fine story, and it's not over generally. Even funerals aren't over. I guess my only point is that don't get discouraged if the first story isn't your best story, because there's going to be more.
That's great. Yeah, so very encouraging. So I'm going to shift a little bit to talking about some of the time limitations and some of the difficulties around logistics for running school newspapers or handling youth journalism. There are issues that may come up later in the conversation around internships or how to get involved in the community. But I think I'd like to talk a little bit about, with our student journalists, a bit about the time limitations. But before I do that, we have a question from the audience from Mary Waterman, who wants to make sure we know why students are getting involved. So I think what I'd like first is to hear a little bit about why you're interested and involved in youth journalism. And I think I'll go to Grace and then Austin. But and then after that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the limitations we have and the limited meeting time and that sort of thing. But Grace, what motivates you to be a journalist, and why are you involved in some of the political things that you do?
So I didn't really know that journalism was something that I love doing, because, at the middle school, I knew like Austin was part of the newspaper, and like I saw them write it, and it was like, oh, that's really cool. And, I would read it, and it was like what they wrote was awesome. But it wasn't until this year at high school where Mr. Strothman was like, hey, you should come to this meeting, see if you want to join. And then I wrote my first article, and I ended up loving it. And I think it's a way to like cover issues I'm really passionate about, and to know that like people are going to read them. And for like other things I'm involved in the community, I just I think it's just a really great way to bring about change. Like, be the change you want to see in the world. Like if you don't do it, who knows who else is going to step up. So I love that about it. And also just on top of also, writing in the newspaper about what I'm doing in the community, I think it really helps put the word out there about what I'm doing. So
That's great. And Austin, you came to me as a fifth grader, and we were just starting a brand new newspaper. So I had been at the middle school, and I had finally sort of succumbed to the amazing Oriana Baez's sort of beckoning, come do this. There was a little bit of a newspaper. I had run the Gazette and the press in Putney, and so then we started. But you were a fifth grader, and we had like 3 people. So I wonder if you could talk a little bit about your experiences there, and then kind of things that hooked you along the way.
So I think when it came to being in 5th grade, it was the first time being within a middle school and the AIM after school program, and we had this whole list of things, and the idea of being on a newspaper or the student newspaper interested me at that time, because that was when I was kind of like I liked writing a bit, and I just thought, hey, I should try it out. I went there. I think 3 people in total.
Yeah, and sometimes 2, often 2, and we really grew. It was great.
It started off small, and then as it went on, it was kind of this. I got to know the community of Bellows Falls more than I had known before, because originally I've lived in Saxons River. I grew up in Saxons River, went to the school there, so I didn't know a whole lot about Bellows Falls until I went to the middle school. So kind of within the middle school years, it helped not only make me better at writing, give me a better chance at writing, but also helped me learn a little bit more about the actual community that I was in. And then from there, it went into the high school, being able to do being able to write a little bit better, being able to do a little bit more, I guess, bigger stories is the word I'm looking for.
Yeah, we had some good big stories, I felt like, in the school paper. And for that, we had a distribution of 500, and we'd spread it around the town. We saw ourselves as a community paper. And we were sort of fixtures in the town hall there. Sheila Neathawk was the town clerk, and we'd show up and say, oh, what's going on? And I remember we did some record searches one time. What are some of your memories about the town vault? I don't know if you can. You were in there with me a couple of times, weren't you?
A lot of records.
But at any rate, it was really fun just to be regular people who showed up around, like, oh, here we are again. We're looking for stories, or we're going to interview somebody. Let's talk a little bit about some of the limitations we have in terms of time. One of the big issues in Guilford that allowed us to produce a really good paper is it was the entire 8th grade that had the project, and it was a set day that we had 3 hours, and before that it was more time. That was an interesting newspaper that came out of a town-wide survey, needs survey, and then they produced a newspaper. I was lucky enough to come into it and learn a lot of things, but we had a set aside time that was for the entire 8th grade, and everybody had a job. Whereas in the middle school in Bellows Falls and in Putney, we had an after-school program that, a couple times a week maybe, and then in the high school, really we're down to a terrier time every couple of weeks, but then we do a lot of individual meetings. So, it's interesting as a person who is running the program and feeling like you don't have nearly enough time to check in. I wonder if either of you would talk a little bit about what's hard about not meeting, or if it works for you. Grace, how do you feel about the fact that we don't really have any dedicated time? Nancy had a journalism class. I'll go to her soon, but go ahead, Grace, talk a little bit about the time and the meeting.
So we meet usually once a week, and it's just during terrier time, which is kind of just like a 30-minute thing 3 times a week, where clubs kind of get together. But I don't really think that's enough time, because I feel like we're usually still talking about plans by the time the dismissal bell rings. And I really wish there was some other time we could meet, maybe a class, or just longer free time at the end of the day to come together, because I don't think 30 minutes does it justice, and that can be very frustrating. So,
and in my role, I have to keep after students and get them to do their work in some of that time, and then there's a bunch of other students that hang around, and I know when I run a meeting, I'm sort of like, all right, everybody else has to go, now we're doing newspaper. We only do that a couple times a week. Austin, you've had some different experiences with the amount of time we've had. What do you think about how to make time and the time you've had? What have you thought about? Can we pull it off,
So, what is it? at the middle school with the after school program, that was 3 to 5. So it was about 2 hours to both get together and then either go out to do an interview or to write paper stories we were currently doing. So we were given about 2 hours every other day, Tuesday and Thursday. And then so the 2 hours I felt like was probably a good amount of time, at least with the every other day, being able to get together at least twice a week and have a fair amount of time to be able to do something. The high school is a bit harder. It is a 30-minute block or 30-minute amount of time at the end of the day that can happen on either Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. And it is a bit harder because you start talking about something, you start discussing a story, and then the bell rings, it's dismissal. And I don't feel like there's quite a bit enough time to be able to really discuss and write within that time. And it gets a little bit harder with trying to plan stuff out, because you'll have a fair amount of people who are wondering, hey, what should I write about, or who should I talk to? So I feel like the 30 minutes isn't quite enough
Right.
for
Yep.
what's going on in the high school.
We try to lay out, in our quick discussion, what's the topic, what are the main issues, who are the contacts you need to follow up with. But honestly, I do a lot of individual follow up, and it works pretty well. People are doing well, and goodness knows you and I talk a lot individually, and that makes it much better, really. But you have to find time to do that. So one thing I wanted to ask Nancy Olson about, who had taught journalism in the high school. Did you do most of the production of the newspaper in the context of your high school class, or did you have another time, or did you do both?
Well, the class was daily for a semester, because it was a block. But there were students who didn't want to take the class, but they wanted to be involved. So we also had an after-school group that met once a week. And most of the production was in that group. The journalism class was, like a feeder of articles for the production. Although some of the people in the after-school group also wrote. But I tried very hard to schedule the journalism class in the fall, because that way I hoped to involve enough students who would want to continue in the after school group in the spring. So, and it worked out pretty well.
I see. Yeah, it's interesting, probably the softwares we've used over the years, and that bears a whole lot of discussion. I'm interested in just hearing a little bit of what you used for production. I did InDesign for a very long time, Guilford Gazette. I was taught to use it by some very well qualified tech people who were brought in and paid a stipend to do that, Tammy Quinn and some others, and they taught InDesign, and I learned from them. And then I used that for many years, and then I've had times where the school wasn't paying for it and I was paying for it. But also more recently, I've given up paying for it, and I've actually been using Google Slides. But what were some of the things you used for production?
We used PageMaker.
Okay.
And that, the technology has changed so much since I retired that even it was changing as year to year. And what I ended up telling the students, because they would say, oh, you didn't teach us any of the online stuff. I said, look, I'm teaching you how to write. I'm teaching you ethics. Those will carry you everywhere. The technology is changing so fast that anything I would teach you now in high school will be obsolete by the time you get out in the field. So that was how I balanced it.
Yeah, I do feel that teaching the students InDesign, which really doesn't exist as part of the normal curriculum for schools, has been one of the most beneficial things in my students becoming professionals in many ways. A lot of the kids who came out of the production department at Guilford Gazette, they really went on to do very interesting things in terms of technology. So I have a topic that I'm moving into around school-based journalism, and there are a lot of different things that we can touch on along the way. And I do want to kind of give a shout out to Mary Waterman. She's been putting some things in the chat, which people should notice, I hope. She really wants to give kudos to Tim at the Herald for supporting student articles. And we'll go to Tim again in a minute. Also, as reporting for the community-based learning experience, apparently they had it built into their schedule. This year, she's working with a group of 8 students doing pieces as time allows in their schedules. So I guess sort of piecing it in with different people at different times. But maybe it's a set time. But in any case, that is used differently by different students. But right now they're using Canva, which is free. And I've heard some good things about that from my tech guy at the high school, and I have yet to really get to know it. Last year we had a student with a Mac, and Macs really have made a big difference for me as in terms of functionality. But moving into the topic of student journalism and the state of school-based journalism, I wonder if some of our editors from papers could talk a little bit about how do we move forward? What are some opportunities that you see in the state of Vermont for young journalists? Yeah, go ahead. Is that Tim?
Yeah. Quickly, before I do that, I just want to point out that there's also a great piece of open source software called Scribus that's a fully featured page layout program that I recommend to a lot of our advertisers who want to put together their own ads and don't want to shell out for InDesign. InDesign is awesome, but Scribus will get the job done, and it puts out a PDF that you can print on a commercial printing press with no problem. Getting back on track.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, someone's asking me a question in the chat.
How do you spell Scriba?
Yeah, Scribus. Back to on the student side. Where do we go to from here? I was going to say kind of early on, I think it was when we were just talking about the students doing on student newspapers facing pushback from administrators. The first thought that came to my mind was, I bet if any student anywhere went to their local paper, that paper would love to have them come in and work with them on whatever project that they are facing. And that's one of the things that I do tell students when I meet with them early on in the year is, you can report on anything you want to report on. The more complicated it is, the more we will want to be involved to support you in that, because that's, we have some experience we can share, but you're very capable of doing the work.
That's great. And I wonder if Jeff, you would talk a little bit about what you see in the Brattleboro area.
I gotta say that I'm perplexed because I've reached out a few times to, well, let me back up. After Nancy retired, we had a couple of interns from BUHS who were phenomenal. And they took the initiative to redevelop the paper into a broadsheet and rebrand it and all that. They built it with our Commons template and customized it, and I tried to mentor them throughout the process. And after they graduated, it has been radio silence. I have reached out probably 5 or 6 times over the years and said, hey, we would love to, anybody who's interested in doing this professionally, if somebody gets fired up about it, we'd love to see them in the newsroom. If you've got students in layout that have questions, I've produced probably between 5,000 and 6,000 pages of the newspaper on InDesign. I know how to help you guys. I can't even get them to respond. And that's made me give up on really trying. Because it's hard enough to do this without having to beg people. But if we love having young people involved in this. We love having students. Not only are they a conduit to the schools, but I'm a 56-year-old dude with no kids. I mean, I am getting increasingly distant from this, from the relevance of our generation and the generation of kids in school and what they're facing. We would love to have that lived experience reflected in our pages better. It's the more that we can integrate with schools, the better. And Stuart, I'd love to reconnect and get you guys involved with what we're doing. And if anybody out there from other schools, if you have questions or whatever I can do to be a resource in the success of your program, that's literally part of our mission at Vermont Independent Media. We would love to be able to help you with things like that.
And I do want to say that Vermont Independent Media has been the impetus for this event, and has Jeff Burgess from the board have reached out to me, and so it's nice to see this connections being made. I wouldn't be surprised if among different editors and people who work at different papers here on the panel would probably say a similar thing about people in their areas who may already have relationships and that sort of thing. Tim, I wondered if you'd talk a little bit about things you've done, opportunities for young journalists. Sorry, not. I was going to go to John. I apologize.
I should probably just leave my thing unmuted because I keep forgetting to turn it back on again. Do you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I share Jeff's frustration, I was saying, with the number of young people who are interested in journalism on a regular basis. The high school in Middlebury let its newspaper die a couple years ago, in part maybe because they started an international baccalaureate program, which is very focused on academics, not leaving as much time for extracurriculars. There's still a student newspaper at the high school in Bristol, Mount Abraham, and they do an okay job. But I've talked once to the teacher up there, and they feel stressed for time. I haven't got a chance to go talk to the students yet myself, but I am totally on board with having them come talk to me or reach out to me. And I would frankly I'd be excited, like Tim said, to give me any kind of story idea, and we'll run with it. But if students are interested in social media, I think they should start their own newspapers online. Make it professional, though. I mean, give yourself a regular schedule, a publishing schedule. Give your time you need to do reporting, and give yourself a certain number of pictures you're going to have, and make it something, a part of your regular life, but put it online. It could be a website, it could be a TikTok. But I think the more, I'm big on writing, and I think people need to learn to write so they can learn to think. But I think if they have these avenues of social media, they should go ahead and use them and just start to do them. If I had a student come to me and want some tips on it, I would say, you do the technology and I'll do the report, help you with the explanation, the story part of it. But whatever we can find to make them interested in if that's social media, so be it.
Yeah, and in some levels, I'm sure many students are doing that. One thing that I've seen over the years at times in my own high school, where my brother and sister were editors of the Greeley Tribune back in New York, there was an offshoot that was sort of a side paper that was produced that had a different focus. And we've also seen in the middle school occasionally another paper will crop up that'll be sort of a bit of a gossip rag, which is always kind of neat when you know there's sort of a culture thriving at that point. So definitely interested in talking about a little bit about, before we go to questions from the audience. And actually, there was a comment in the chat that I thought was interesting. There's a student from Landmark College. He is involved in a newspaper that's produced by Matt Gander, who's done a number of feature articles with his partner, Chantilly, for the Commons. And he is a professor at Landmark College. But in any case, the student is talking a little bit about his experience maintaining the student newspaper. It's a big challenge. They have a senior seminar class and do it as part of that. They've had a print student newspaper apparently since 2001. I actually ran a newspaper there for a short while in my English class. It was like 1998. But he says the biggest challenge they've had is sort of maintaining a staff. But they've gone digital. And that was an interesting issue for our group at the high school. We had gone digital, but it was our perception that nobody read the newspaper. And that went on for like 2 years. And people would sort of do these stories that were, not really deep, but they'd have a thing to put on their college resume. But I didn't think, the diagnostics for the website were very limited. So we actually went back to a print publication. So at any rate, just a very interesting topic, and maybe we'll get another question from that person as we go. And I also want to point out that there's some good discussion about software in the chat for people who may not have seen it. But I kind of want to open this up, and I'm not sure who might want to respond, but there's this idea that youth are the future of journalism, and they're the ones who we hope will save local media. We don't want to necessarily be prescriptive. We'd love to see people kind of getting out and making the difference there. I wonder about this idea of youth saving local media. It's funny, as a teacher, I feel like a little protective, like don't expect too much, but at the same time, it's really true. And I don't know, the youth saving local media. To me, that's a big question. Maybe I'll just go ahead and try John. What do you think about youth saving local media?
I guess I'm a little skeptical that on their own they can save local media, but I think that you should be excited about saving local media and surprise me because they do all the time. From a practical perspective, if they would come to me with stories, either ideas or something written out 1,000 pages long, we would put that in the paper and we'd get their name out there and we get their ideas out there, and that would be great. And there are a couple small towns around here that used to have very bad rags, but you know what? They could put their names into those, and that'd be fine. They'd get their names out there and they get their ideas out there. And if there were something really good, we'd pick it up and run a separate story ourselves. So I think the energy of the youth is going to save community, smaller town newspapers. I don't think they're going to do it on their own. I think they need the whole community, really, frankly. They need, the adults and the people with experience and the people who doubt them as well.
Good. I'd love to go quickly to panelists one at a time to very briefly address that issue. Something to say about youth and the future of journalism. I don't know if you have something in mind. Austin, do you feel like this is an important thing for youth to pursue and lead in?
I would say so. I would say it's definitely important for youth to pursue this kind of thing, because not only will it help both the students connect with the community, but it'll also kind of help the community become closer in terms of them getting to know the students a little bit better, and the students being able to get to know the community. And then overall, it might spark a bit more of an interest in just overall the community newspapers, and then eventually would hopefully bring their popularities back up again.
Great. And Grace, as a person who I think is presenting to the school board in a week or so, what do you think about this idea of youth leading media and public opinion, or not necessarily public opinion, but journalism? Why is that important?
I think that's important because, we are, I guess, we're the younger generation. So like if we don't step up and do something, local journalism might fizzle out after a while, and that would be really sad. People need to know news about what's happening in their community. It can bring people closer together. And a lot of people with local journalism, like you might know the people writing the articles, and it just gives that more personal connection, and it entices people to read more often, especially because there's so many things happening in a small community, and unless you have that local journalism, you're not going to know necessarily that it's happening. So it's a very crucial part of communities that I definitely think should be shown to youth more often, so then we can get more people to want to fight for this.
And I'll note also that both of them Grace and Austin, have been on the student council, I think, since they've joined the school. Tim, will you say a little something about the state of youth and journalism and media? What do you see for the future?
I am not expecting young people to start storming the castles and single-handedly saving local news, but if they don't care about it, then we're all toast. So I mean, that's really what the future is. If we don't have an ongoing supply of people who really passionately care about what's happening in their own world, then there's no point of having newspapers, and that's kind of all there is to it.
Thank you. I'm definitely looking forward to hearing from Nancy, who has a lot of experience teaching high schoolers and now has moved on to writing for the Commons. She and Maggie Cassidy sort of bears mention, who's been doing reporting at the state level after being a teacher there for many years, probably has good perspective on things you would say to youth about the importance of being involved in writing and your community.
I always came at it from the writing, because there is nothing like seeing your name in print that first time. As Grace was saying earlier, that when her first article was out, it was just magic. And by coming at it through the writing, you can, sharing your writing in class, revising your writing in class, you begin to have a sense of the impact that your writing can have on other people. And then to go from there to the journalism, that was the path that I tried to walk to help people make that journey. Because the writing you can use forever, anywhere, and then sort of guide people in the direction of using your writing to affect others or inform others. So that was how I approached it.
Very good. Remembering those Aristotelian purposes of writing there. to inform, and not necessarily to entertain, but we provide that as well. So I wanted to wrap up a bit and take some questions from the audience, if there are any. But before I did, another great comment from Mary Waterman, who I want to know more about. Any rate, in any case, she notes that, and clearly this is a person who is running student journalism programs, and notes that these are products that students wind up with. They have published pieces, juried, they've been reviewed by a variety of people. They develop skills in writing, as Nancy pointed out, business writing, parallel news writing, handling a variety of topics, interview skills. I added a couple things there, but also noting that many of the articles they're used in the school newsletters, so that they can go out in a variety of settings. They can be on the school website. They don't have to just be in the school newspaper, and they're a way of conveying information to the public. Genuine and authentic work. It's visible to the public. And one thing that she notes, and I would say this hasn't come up, but it's something that we absolutely have done. I know Austin can relate to this. We try to keep a positive spin on things. I have students who I feel like we do sports articles and it's a lot of, it feels a little hypey, and I kind of tone it down a little, but at the same time, you know, it's a bit of give the people what they want. We had a cover article recently about our football championship, and you know, a lot of great quotes. But you quote people for those things. You don't necessarily say it yourself in the article, I guess. In any case, we're very excited and very grateful for all of these panelists for joining us. I think it's been a very valuable discussion. I think we've really addressed some of the deep issues around student journalism and heard both from youth and from experienced editors. I was curious and wanted to open it up. I'm reviewing my list of people watching and curious if anybody had any questions for the audience. It may be that some people may want to speak up and ask. I'm just trying to review and see who might have any. Or you can put them in chat as well. Let me scroll down here. Oh, how can we make them care? Okay, great. Sorry, a lot just was added. So I just want to put out there and it may be that people would have said, but can anyone think of any specific opportunities or programs that are out there to encourage youth? I think that in some cases, this might be specific to high schools. What kind of a journalism program does it have? Can anyone, is anyone willing to, from the panel or anyone?
I do know one thing. The New England Press Association has a youth journalist scholarship. I don't know the details of it right now, but I do remember earlier in the year, they were asking, I believe it goes through newspapers. So newspapers get a fund that they can then pay youth journalists for, it might be during the summer. But I would look on the New England Press Association website and see if you can find information about that. It might be too late for this year, but it's certainly something if you're interested, you should look at it and find out if there's a way that you can get involved, because I know it's for high schoolers.
That's great. We have a hand up from Randy Holhut. I wonder if we can call on him.
Okay. All right. In terms of resources, the Commons certainly has been a resource. In our existence, we've given chances for. Okay. In our experience, we've given chances to apprentices of all ages, but particularly high school students. And some papers try to segregate youth journalism we put it out front. If it's good enough to be out front, it doesn't matter where it came from or the age of the person who submitted it. And we've had really strong stories over the years that have been produced by people who haven't gotten their high school diplomas yet. So other papers, I think if they're looking to increase youth involvement in journalism, need to think like that and give high school age reporters a chance to really do serious work that is guided by the professional staff, but allowing the new voices to join the chorus.
That's great. And I want to thank you also, Randy, for being someone who's covered a lot of high school things over the years. I remember coming out last year to cover our ultimate team playing in Brattleboro.
And I'll see you in a few weeks.
Budding program, right? Jeff, did you have your hand up? Want to say something?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that any young person who expresses an interest and has a passion and a burning desire to explore this, I don't know anybody in this business who doesn't take that as the highest form of compliment. If if you put yourself out there and you want to become involved in a newspaper around here, and it doesn't have to be ours. I know I've pitched that a couple of times tonight, probably shamelessly, but we all are doing this stuff because we love it, and it means the world to us when we find young people who love it too, because we all learned. I learned this trade. I was 16 years old and I wandered into a newspaper, And I learned the bulk of the principles of what I know about this from consummate professionals who didn't have to give me the time that they gave. But they did. And I consider it the biggest honor to be able to do the same thing with anybody who wants to learn that. So, and I know other newspaper professionals feel just as strongly about that. So, if you wander into a newsroom, you're probably never going to leave.
Yeah, I hope people.
Sorry, that sounded creepy. I didn't mean for that to sound creepy.
No, I think that it was taken in the best intentions. I do feel that there is a bug there, and I felt it at historical societies looking at things. I know Austin's been fascinated down at the historical society. We fall into this rabbit hole of this is a new and interesting story, and
Yeah.
or looking at newspapers from the 1920s and
Yeah.
what were they interested in, what's going on.
Yeah.
If we write them now, people will know about them in that same vein. And so it's very powerful.
Yeah.
So we're going to wrap up fairly soon. I do feel that it has been an amazing group, but we do have some more time, and we do have time for questions as they come up. So I'd love to go to Ben Boyington, who just put his hand up.
I do have a couple things to offer, but I wanted to note that, oh, you want my video? Fine.
As you like.
System's like, start your video, Ben. Okay. Yes, I have a face. It's true. Hi, see, crazy bearded guy. I wanted to first hand off to Mary because she said she wanted to say something, but her hand raising option isn't working. So I just saw in the comments. So maybe we can start with Mary, and then I'll come back if that's okay.
Great.
I didn't aim to bump you there, Ben. I guess, am I connected? I'm not sure. Still showing Ben.
You're on, I can hear you.
Okay. Just a really quick comment. So one of the things that's helped us over the years, I've probably had student news reporters. I've been 21 years at the school, and I've had news reporters probably since my third year there, when a student was interested in journalism and was the first one to start the relationship with the Herald. And to bring the level of professionalism up, what the Herald did was give the students a small stipend. You know, and it's enough that creates a value added in the student's mind. You know, I get a little stipend for what I'm doing. And then later the newspaper got added in because we had so many pieces. So some years students do the community-based learning where it's right built into their schedule, where it's easier for them to budget time to do more writing. Other years I have students that want to do just a smaller piece. And so, you know, we build it into the schedule, and they just maybe only write once a month for the Herald. But the Herald's been our main go-to. And then we build local things around the school newspaper as well, like surveying students to find out issues that are going on, et cetera. But I just wanted to do a little shout out with how Tim has made the relationship so lasting, and the Herald with our students, you know, where it's equated to an internship level of experience. It becomes a huge resume builder. So back to you, Ben. Thank you.
And we're off. Wait, I'll bring my video back. Unable to start. Oh, okay. There we go. Boy, Zoom is fun, isn't it? Hi, I'm back. A couple things. First of all, thanks so much, professional journalists and such. You guys are amazing. You're doing great work with students. I love the support that I'm hearing. Anything that's like support the youth, I'm just excited. So just wonderful to hear from all these folks, teachers and journalists, you know, offering these opportunities. So fantastic. Someone asked earlier, you know, how do we get students to care? And I think I wrote it in the thing there, but I think it's like, I think kids today, students today, young people today, all, you know, age range, but care about so much. I mean, I just feel like I watch, you know, kids in actions, young people in action, and I'm stunned at how involved it seems like so many are. You know, I grew up in the 80s and we didn't care. We just wanted to go to concerts and, you know, be dumb. And so that's not true. I mean, there were people, but I just feel like it's so much stronger now. And one of the things is like, some of these students, given the opportunity, if they're involved in some kind of activism, you know, as Grace was saying earlier, like being able to write about things that I care about, right? How do we open those doors? And part of it is to just kind of tap into those passions. And I forget, I think maybe it was Jeff who said, you know, if you go to a newspaper and say, hey, I want to do some work with you, you know, local newspaper's going to go, yeah, cool, let's do it. And it might have been Jeff or somebody else who said, and we'll support you. Maybe that was John. You know, and we'll help you with those parts that are new to you and those, you know, like, let's do work together. So I think that's really powerful, is to open those doors. And I was thinking about classes, you know, journalism classes, courses, and I hesitate to say this being an educator, but I feel like they often don't work. You know, that it's not, then kids are in there to get a credit or to you know, pick up an elective, or and some of them care, you know, deeply about the work, and others are just kind of there to show up. And I almost feel like the club action, and I think Mr. Strothman, I think that's what you do, right? Is sort of a stronger forum, because then kids come because they want to, right? But the question becomes, how do you get them to want to? And I think I dropped the idea in the chat about, you know, panels of youth journalists. Maybe there's a group that can do like a student run forum like this, that can advertise its panel to different schools, you know, around Vermont, or anywhere really in New England. I mean, it's digital, so we could take it anywhere. Or they could take it anywhere. But, you know, maybe that's an idea. You know, maybe Austin and Grace, and maybe, you know, some folks who would even at other schools. What about across school digital journalism, where it's not just your school doing it, but there's like an area newspaper built with kids from different schools? And I'm not putting all the weight on you, Grace and Austin, but maybe you do know students at other schools. I mean, you probably do from other things you do, right? Maybe that's a thing that starts to grow, you know, when we're not limited to print. And as much as I still love the, you know, the community, you know, print newspapers you can hold, but, you know, capitalize on the technology, you know, that's a thought too. So I'm rambling now. I'll stop with that part. I do want to say that I'll do a little shameless plug for Project Censored. You journalists might know who that group is out in California. I'm affiliated with them, and they have a program called Validated Independent News Stories, and they primarily work with colleges around the country. I think they have, it's like 90 colleges now around the country that does the VINS work. And they publish a book every year. It's the Censored Yearbook. It's the top 20 censored news stories, and they kind of define censored.
In a copy of that in my room. I didn't know the organization. Yeah, Project Censored. They're great. If you want a connection, I can hook you up if you want to talk to any of those folks over there. So I'm a member of the family. I'm on the board, whatever, but I'm part of the crowd over there. So, but they do a lot of good work, and it would be great to see about bringing high school work into that. And I do know some high schools have adopted the sort of VINS format. I don't know if Project Censored has yet embraced the idea of bringing high school student writers in, but that book, those top censored news stories, it's a compilation. Well, part of it is a compilation of college students who have written articles on lesser reported or unreported news stories. Really good stuff. They publish a book every year. Young journalists, you might find this interesting, just in general, whether or not we can build it into any kind of high school level work. But they're doing more and more work. They've created a book publishing imprint. So, you know, they're definitely expanding their work. And I think that's something that journalism teachers and student newspaper runners might want to take advantage of. The last thing I'll say, because I'm monopolizing everyone's time, but a few people brought up, and I know Mary, you brought up, you know, keeping it positive. I want to do a plug, and I'll put his name in the chat. But I want to do a plug for Ken Burrows out in California, and he works with a couple of other people. I'm not sure who's in that group now. I think I'll just type in some names here, but he does work in what he calls constructive journalism. So it's solutions media rather than, you know, negative media. And he's done a lot of presenting, certainly on the West Coast. I don't know if he's come east yet, but he does a lot of really cool work with that. So constructive journalism, you can Google him, and
find out some interesting work that they're up to. And he's based in Bay Area somewhere. I think Stephanie is working. So I just wanted to drop that in there for those who are interested in the idea of keeping it positive, but not only keeping it positive, but treating, difficult issues with a more positive angle, with a what do we do about it angle, almost an advocacy kind of positioning rather than just reporting. That might muddy the waters for some of you journalists, I know, but I want to throw that in there. So I put his name in there. Thank you again. Thank you. Great event tonight. Thanks so much.
Take notes from the chat, and it's interesting the gradations of student choice involved in student journalism. I've had both situations where all the 8th graders did it. I've had situations where I made my particular group do it, and we went into town and interviewed people, and they loved it, but it wasn't very deep. And then I've got the club that has got pretty strong involvement. Another question, we're going to go a little longer for those who are up for it, for a question from Kenny Pepper.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, thanks for doing this. I mean, I'm a operations intern at the Commons, and I can attest to what they've been saying. I essentially did walk in and ask, what can I do? I don't write, but what can I do? And they found work for me. So, but my question is, for the journalists, I'm curious, how do you separate your personal feelings and opinions when covering a story or event that you don't agree with and that you have to cover?
Looking around, I saw Jeff's hand go up. I'll take him, I guess. Okay, we're wrapping up pretty soon though.
Yeah, I would say we compartmentalize. Professionally, our job is not to cover everything that we agree with, but to try to really take in the truth of the matter and understand the dynamics behind what is making news happen, and reflect that in print. And to quote Donald Murray again, to collect, to order, and to clarify. I mean, to make what the whole of what is out there vivid for people to come to an understanding. That's the best I could say is that we can't divorce, we can't pretend that we don't have our own opinions. And those opinions certainly inform what we cover and how we cover it, but to the best of our abilities, we really try hard to meet people and to question them, and to question our own beliefs as we're learning more. Never stop learning.
I apologize, I was muted. I think that's a great philosophical and ethical statement for us to close with. So I just really want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Vermont Independent Media for pulling this together. I want to thank Brattleboro Community Television for hosting this event tonight. I hope that many people who are listening will share it, and we'll have the opportunity to see it in the future, to hear all of these important opinions and thoughts. So thank you so much, and I think I'm going to sign off.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Stuart.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Grace. Thanks, Austin.
Thanks, kid.
Yep.